Thank you very much. Please be seated, friends. Welcome, Holiday Hill. Welcome, live stream. Glad to see you here. I am Josh Slocum, student pastor here at Holiday Hill. Our senior pastor, Pastor Albert, is out for the next couple of weeks, and I have a story to tell you. I had planned to wear this earlier this week. I did. I talk about for years now, I've talked about that this is my COVID-19 shirt. My Jaguar shirt's my COVID-19 shirt because they can't catch anything. So that was for years my COVID-19 shirt. I was prepared to wear this shirt today, and then I'm watching the game, and by halftime I'm like, well, I'm still gonna wear it. I'm just gonna wear it ironically. Oh my word. Oh my word. My son, who is very enthralled in football, was out cold on the couch as they're about to kick that game-winning field goal. I'm telling Noah, wake up, you gotta watch this. They're gonna come back. Ugh. He didn't know till this morning. I woke him up this morning. He's like, how bad was it? I'm like, bad, they won. No, they didn't. Yes, they did. They won. And now it looks like we're gonna have to play Kansas City. So it was great while it lasted, guys. So anyway, we'll take what we could get. But we are going through the book of Philippians. Pastor Albert's been walking with us through the book of Philippians. And I will be with you guys this week and also next week, continuing on that series. We're now in Philippians chapter 2. So if you guys got your Bibles, we're going to be in Philippians chapter 2. If you don't have a Bible, there will be a Bible in the seat in front of you to which you can turn to Philippians chapter 2. And if you, for whatever reason, don't want to reach over, bad back, I don't know where it's at, I don't want to do the table of contents, we're also going to have Philippians chapter 2 up on the screen as we go along. So again, we're going to be in Philippians chapter 2 as we continue this walk through Philippians. And the main topic of today is about humility. Humility. The Jaguars just did what they did, and now I have to preach on humility. God's funny. So we're going through humility, and sometimes when you hear what I call like these very like church or spiritual words, I don't know, maybe I just feel this way, but I feel sometimes we say these certain church spiritual kind of words, and we really don't delve into what they really mean, but we're too afraid to ask because everyone else is nodding their head like they too also know what this means. So maybe we may feel a little scared to step out of that comfort zone and be like, I have no. So you say these words like holy or sanctified or grace, and then you got humility and, walking in the Spirit, abiding in God's truth. You hear these phrases and you're like, but everyone's we feel like everyone's nodding their head, so we're not bold enough to actually ask out loud what this means. And today we talk about humility. And one thing I've shared with our teenagers many a time is sometimes to understand the meaning of the word or to get a better handle of the meaning of the word, we have to look at the opposite of the meaning of the word. So what does the opposite of humility look like? What does the opposite of humble look like? And I think it's one of the best places you can go into that, not just confidence, but like confidence with like the volume turned all the way up, is in our sports world. And one of the most popular ones has to be Muhammad Ali. I mean, his infamous quote, I am the greatest. I mean, so humble that guy is. I am the greatest. I said that before I even knew I was. I am the greatest, Muhammad Ali. Some people still refer to him still to this day as just simply the greatest. I'm a basketball fan, and one of my favorite stories, or some of my favorite basketball stories, are centered around the great Larry Byrd, Larry Legend himself, the hick from Salt Lick, as he was sometimes called, played for the Boston Celtics. This guy was so good. One time he played a game left-handed just because he was bored. And he still was the top scorer on the team. He shot left-handed the entire time. But one of the most great stories about Larry Byrd came from one of the All-Star games. He was in the three-point shootout competition. He walks into the locker room, and he asks the boys in there, who's playing for second? And then he goes out there in his warm-ups. That's the actual picture. Never took off his warm-ups and won the three-point contest. Yeah, in his warm-ups, he won this thing. Larry Byrd, one of the great basketball players. And then you move more to the modern day, and you think about Tom Brady. I mean, here's what's so, I know, boo, right? But here's the crazy thing about Tom Brady. It was kind of an inside word when you would call someone the GOAT, which of course it's an acronym for greatest of all time. And when it came to football, people talked about, who really was the greatest of all time. Maybe it was Montana, maybe it was Jerry Rice. And there's other people that could probably vie for that title. But then you have this guy holding up 7 championship rings, and now he's simply referred to as the GOAT, Tom Brady, the GOAT of football, the greatest of all time. But here's the thing about people who have big egos, who think they're all high and mighty, people who just have this pie in the sky idea of themselves and who they are, they get, as we call, humbled. At some point or another, they all get humbled. Larry Holmes humbled Muhammad Ali. His own manager threw in the towel. That's where the proverbial term comes from, throwing in the towel. Yeah. Larry Byrd had back trouble. And then beyond that, he ended up having to play against some guy named Michael Jordan. I don't ever know what happened to that guy. And then Tom Brady, he had Giselle and bad financial advice through FTX. That's what ultimately took Tom Brady down, right? Don't invest in the crypto, guys. It was bad. So, or don't invest with FTX. That was really bad. And they all, at one point or another, get humbled. Sometimes to understand what the word means, you have to look at the opposite of what the word means. And the Apostle Paul is the one who writes the book of Philippians. And in this passage we're going to delve into, these guys that we mentioned, they started off big, and then they ultimately, one way or another, due to events, they were humbled. In other words, get a better idea of who you are and where you stand in the realm of creation. They were all humbled. But Paul encourages these believers in this church called Philippi, start with humility. It begins with humility. Don't get this idea of pie, I'm better than everyone else, pie in the sky, sense of entitlement, and then come into situations where you're humbled. No, start with humility and work from there. Now, as we're going to delve into Philippians and this apostle named Paul, as I've done several times before, but I'm going to do it again because it's always good to be repetitive. We're going to do Paul and Philippians a backstory. In other words, who is this guy and who is this church and what's this all about? Paul was not always known by the name of Paul. There was once upon a time he went by a different name, and that was Saul of Tarsus. And he was trained in the Pharisaical order. In other words, he was trained to be a Jewish scholar, teacher, and authority figure in the Jewish faith and tradition. That's where he started in, and he went by the name Saul. To be part of this, one of the first things you have to do is you have to memorize the first 5 books of the Bible verbatim without flaw. You have to, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth, and just go. And you have to basically recite it verbatim until the person listening to you gets bored. And then beyond that, they might actually, one of your teachers or as a test, they might throw out a random verse to you. And Yahweh said to Moses to go up to the mountain, go. And you have to figure out where they were and just go, and again, until they get bored listening to you. You had to prove yourself. This is who Saul of Tarsus was. He was a religious zealot, and he was a guy that was going places in the Jewish faith and tradition and religion. And one thing he didn't like at the time were these people that were coming out claiming that this guy named Jesus of Nazareth was the Jewish Messiah, that Jesus of Nazareth was dying for sins and he resurrected. He didn't like this story, and he didn't like their followers. And he was very zealous also about getting these people wiped out, pushing them aside, getting the attention off of them. And while he is on his way to a town called Damascus, a miraculous event happens. The incarnate, in body, Jesus Christ himself appears before Saul of Tarsus. And from that moment on, Saul was never the same. Shortly after the event, he was blinded, he was hurt and injured. He was miraculously healed from his blindness, although some say it may have not been a full healing, but that's debatable. But from that moment on, he then changes his name. He changes his name to a more Gentile name, a more Roman citizen name, which was the name of Paul. And from there, he commits himself to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the way he does this is he becomes a missionary throughout the Roman Empire. And what he does as a strategy is he goes to the major metropolitan cities. Again, he went to Philippi. He went to Corinth. He went to Ephesus. In our modern day time, if it was the 21st century, he would go to New York. He would go to Washington, D.C. He would go to London. These are the major cities he would go to and hit. He went to the major metropolitan hubs and cities. That's where he would go. And from there, he would preach the gospel, and he would get, as soon as he would get a group of converts together, an assembly of followers of Jesus, you officially have what they would define as a church. And as the church was then established in that city, he would then move on and go to other places. And he had follow-up guys who would basically lead that church after he left. One was named Timothy, another was named Titus, by the way. And he had a few of them who would follow up on this. Philippi was one of the first churches that Paul started. It was the first place that we believe that was the first place Paul ever preached into the European continent. Philippi was named after Alexander the Great's dad. That's where the name comes from. It was a Roman colony. Some people called it a miniature Rome, if you will. Some of the first sermons of the gospel were preached by Paul in Philippi on the European continent. And this was a church that Paul had a lot of affection for. He had a lot of love for. And we could probably feel that, right, in our own lives. There are places, there are people, there are groups, there are cliques and organizations and clubs that for whatever reason are close to our heart. Maybe it's a church, maybe it's a particular Sunday school group or small group. Maybe it's a group of friends from college or high school. Maybe it's people that you go to work with, but you have affection for these people. You have affection for this group. This was Paul in the church of Philippi. Paul would write letters to churches because that's the correspondence. That's the way you communicate. There was no email. There was no text messaging. There was no 24/7 cable news. So there was no phone. So writing was the way to go. And Paul would write letters to these churches he helped start and would encourage them. And sometimes he'd ask for help, and sometimes he'd also correct them. This is what Paul would do. This is a bulk of our New Testament. They're called epistles. That's a fancy word for letters. He would write letters to these churches. So the book of Galatians in your Bible is a letter that Paul wrote to the church of Galatia. The book of Ephesians is a letter that Paul wrote to the church of Ephesus. The book of Colossians is a letter that Paul wrote to the church of Colossae. The book of Romans is a letter that Paul wrote to the church of Rome. A lot of our New Testament is letters written by Paul, and the Philippians are no different except for one small thing. The letter of Philippians doesn't have any negativity in it. In other words, there's no correction in it. There's no part of this book or this letter where Paul says, you guys are doing this very terribly, shape up. Or you guys are doing this wrong, you need to change this. Or I hear that one of your people is acting a fool and you need to rise up and make sure they ain't acting a fool anymore. You're supposed to be representing Jesus. Stop acting like a fool. Some of those letters, he has to write those things. But for Philippi, for the book of Philippians, this is not true. They were a different breed entirely. And a common word you see in the book of Philippians is the word joy. Joy. How this church brings them joy. It should also be mentioned that when Paul's writing this letter, he's under house arrest through the Roman Empire. He's under house arrest. He's facing execution. And in the midst of facing execution, in the face of house arrest, he writes about how this church brings him joy. How these people bring him joy. The church wasn't a building, it was a people. Never forget that, by the way. The church is not a building, it's a people. That's your freebie. Appreciate it. So, it is your freebie. It was not a building, it's a people, and these people brought him joy. And how thinking about him just pushes him even further. So today we're in Philippians chapter 2. We're talking about humility. And the first two verses are like so. Philippians 2, 1 through 2. Therefore, if there's any encouragement in Christ, any consolation of love, any fellowship of his Spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in the same Spirit, intent on one purpose. In other words, we remember what Christ has given us. We remember what Christ has given us. The opening verses are basically an if-then, right? It's an if-then conditional. If this is happening, if this is true, then this must also be true. If these things are being accomplished, then these things must be in response to those things being accomplished. It's a conditional statement, if-then. And he's giving this to the Philippian church. if-then conditional statement, and we remember what Christ has given to us. I was with you guys in November looking at one of the early verses of Philippians chapter 1. And one of the things I shared with you guys way back when, so long ago, it was like, gosh, it was last year. It was so long ago, and that was remembering the people that invested in your life. Remembering the people that spiritually invested in you. Remembering the people who taught your Sunday school class. Remembering the people who were part of your vacation Bible school. Remembering the people who maybe you were older in life, who maybe they were college students or high school friends, who invited you to church to be a part of this thing, to follow after and to put faith and trust in Jesus Christ. Maybe it was your mother or your father or your grandfather or your grandmother. Regardless of who it was, there are people in your life, and not just a person, but people in your life who have spiritually invested in you. They prayed with you. They prayed for you. There are people who, when everyone gave up on you, they didn't. There are people in your life, when you thought it was all over, when you thought there was no hope left for you, those people were the ones cheering you on. They were the ones encouraging you. They weren't like Muhammad Ali's manager throwing in a towel on your behalf. No, they encouraged you to press on. And you know what? You're still here. They saw something in you. And if they saw something in you, and if they loved you, and if they encouraged you, perhaps maybe it's time for you and me to do the same for someone else. We talked about that last time I was with you guys talking about Philippians. This kind of builds on that, but it goes more to the bedrock of the matter. It goes more to the source of the matter. Again, look at the words of chapter 2, verse 1, and the idea of the consolidation of love. If Jesus, but he's not talking about other people. He's talking about Jesus. If Jesus has done these things for you, if Jesus has given you encouragement, if Jesus has sparked a fire of love inside of you, if he's done these things, if it's him who's done these things, then continue on, being of one accord. He's not talking about a Honda car, by the way. Being of one accord, being united, being united as a church with the same thought and mission and purpose in mind. It doesn't mean that we're clones and we're drones and we're all looking alike and acting alike. But it does mean we have a common purpose and a common goal. Church family, Holiday Hill family, our goal and purpose needs to be reaching this community for Jesus. Again, we say the words and we all kind of nod our head, but what does that really mean? It means that in my action and my words and my attitude, I make Jesus important in my life. And this is what Paul is challenging the church of Philippi. And on this very day, this is what Paul is challenging us to do as well. Make Jesus a priority in your individual life, collectively and individually. Why? Because Jesus has done so much for you. Amen. He loved you when you were unlovable. He died for you while you were a sinner. And he did the same for me too. God is holy. And God is love. God is a heavenly father, not a heavenly grandfather. And there's a difference. Fathers have to issue discipline. Grandfathers, oh, kids will be kids. Here's a butterscotch. Give them all the sugar and send them home. It'll be fine. God's a heavenly father, not a heavenly grandfather. You're absolutely right. God is love. But how does one justify, how does one balance the scales of a holy God who can't allow sin and a people who are nothing but sinful? He sends his only begotten son to die for us and was obedient even to death on a cross. As we'll see in the later verses next week. It all builds and it's all connected. Jesus has done so much for us. And if we recognize that, and church family, if we see that, then we are to act accordingly and do something about it. This past school year as a youth pastor, as a student minister, has definitely been an interesting one. Last summer, so midway 2022, I've been here now for 15 years. We graduated out, Holiday Hill family, the largest graduating class our youth department's ever seen since I've been here. The class of 2022 was huge numerically. Absolutely ginormous. And there's a few of them sitting in the van on the summer trip, some of the youth, some of them from 2022. And if you've ever been part of a group, everyone has a role in their group. Some people are like your go-getters. Some people are like more out there. Some people are more laid back. Some people like take charge. But some people, could be in front of the group, but some people can work behind the scenes and get things done, and they don't need all the fanfare. And God bless any and all who, whatever category you may find yourself in, God bless you all. They're all important. They all have an important role. And for class of 2022, a lot of them had important roles. And now they're graduating out. Oh, no. There are people that, as a student minister, I depended on from that class to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And now they're walking out the door. And they're graduating, they're moving on, and it's wonderful that they are. It's wonderful that they're growing and maturing. And many of them are still with us. I make it sound like they're dead, like they're still with us. No, many of them are still with us here in our church. And not only are they in our church and filling seats, they're in our church and serving in various capacities. Many of them are going to be actually at our next gen training right after service today. Some of them are operating camera and AV. Some of them work in our preschool and children's ministries. Some of them are working in our youth ministries. We have a lot of our young people involved in church, and God bless them that they do. But when they moved out of the youth department, I had a personal concern, and one of them is like, who's going to fill the void? Because again, some of them were really good at what I would call finding the odd one out, finding the kid that's sitting by themselves and inviting them to be a part, inviting them to join in. They had that eye, and many of them had that heart about them. And now they were going to be gone, and I was worried about, what about the kids who come in who might be the odd one out? What about the kid who might be sitting in the corner? Yeah, I'm the youth pastor, and I can go and say hi, and yeah, I will, but some people may see like I'm kind of obligated to because I'm the guy, I'm the dude, I kind of have to. It's different when a peer does it, though. It really is. And what happened was I had one of my freshmen, who's now a sophomore, out of nowhere, after the class of 2022 left, started being that person. Had a few new kids come in. She would invite them to sit with her. When we would play games, and the games would sometimes require a partner or a friend to work with, she would volunteer herself to those new teenagers who come in the door. And I noticed this. And I sent her a text and to encourage her for that reason. I'm like, hey, I noticed what you've been doing. I noticed that you've been, being kind to the new kids. I noticed you've been very friendly. I noticed that you're making the new folks feel welcome. I just want to let you know it's not going overlooked. I'm noticing it. And I want to let you know, just thank you. As your student pastor, thank you so much. It means a lot. And her response was very eye-opening. She said this, I'm just trying to do what Aaron and them did for me. I'm just trying to do what Aaron was one of the class of 2022. I'm just trying to do what Aaron and them did for me. If there's anything, if there's anyone who has inspired you, who's loved you, who's encouraged you, do it for someone else now. And don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait next week. Don't wait till your 50th or 90th birthday. Do it now. Now's a good day. But Paul digs deeper in these opening verses, not just for those people. We're going to the bedrock and foundation. Do it because Jesus did it for you. Not just those wonderful people, but those wonderful people did it because of Jesus. Do it for Jesus. Verse 3. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility consider one another as more important than yourselves. In other words, I put it to you like this. Value the people with whom we will grow. Value the people with whom we will grow. Later this afternoon, I'm going to do something I thought I would never do in my lifetime. I'm going to officiate a wedding. Now, I've officiated weddings before, but this is a different kind of wedding. It's a Star Wars wedding. This is happening. For those that don't know, I love Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. I'm the proud owner of several lightsabers. I know all 7 forms of lightsaber combat. I have Jedi robes. And when the bride and groom found out I had Jedi robes, they're like, would you officiate our wedding in your Jedi robes? To which my response was, will I ever? And in the weather we're having right now, those robes are warm. Oh gosh, it's going to be the best day ever. I get to walk out in public with a lightsaber in Jedi gear, and that's going to be normal. It's great. It's great. My wife won't let me walk through the mall in my Jedi robes, But I'm at a Star Wars wedding. I'm going to fit in just fine. I'm going to be hanging out with Darth Vader and R2-D2. It's going to be great. By the way, the droid is actually a ring bearer. We did the rehearsal yesterday. Yeah, they got a droid as the ring bearer to like wheel in, holding the rings. Yeah, this is the best day. The Jaguars win. I got a Star Wars wedding. Seriously, best day ever. Like, you just can't get any better than this. But one of the requirements I do as an officiant is I require they have to go through some form of premarital counseling, whether it be with me or someone else. And this couple option to go with me because we're nerds and we speak each other's languages, clearly. Because the bride not just signed off on it, she's the one like gung-ho about the Star Wars wedding. So we're going through premarital counseling. And one of the cool things I like doing with young couples is premarital. And talking about where they come from. Because again, we all have stories. None of us are coming out of a vacuum. We all have stories. Again, we have people, for better or worse, that have contributed to building us and making us the wonderful, spectacular snowflakes we all are. I mean, we're all unique. That's just the way it is. And we go through these things. We go through premarital counseling. We talk about the things that make us tick. We talk about those pet peeves. We talk about each other's family. Because you ever think of it this way? The way your family is defined as normal. And then when you marry someone else and they have a family that's definitely not like yours, by definition, that's weird, whether it is or not. Like, your family meets for Christmas? Ew. Like, that, because in your family, that may be not normal. Therefore, it is weird. And then you're bringing these two families together. Or maybe how their parents raised them versus how your parents raised you are two separate things. And now you're trying to raise a kid together. Yeah, this is why we have premarital counseling. We talk about these things. And one of the things that I've discovered, and something I say often in my premarital counseling to these couples, this bride and groom who are starry-eyed and excited and making all the plans and stressing about the invitation and what the wedding cake's going to taste like and everything else in between, is I have to remind them of this. And I'll remind you, married couples, as, again, an additional freebie for the day. I make them look at one another and I say this: understand this now. And again, you may not understand or appreciate it fully now, but there will be a day you will. And you need to accept this truth. You're making vows to this person. This person is not your enemy. This person is not your enemy. That bride that you're about to make vows to, she's not your enemy. And if she is, why are you marrying her? This groom that you see over here, he's not your enemy. And if he is, why are you marrying him? This isn't your enemy. This isn't your enemy. This is the person you're committing your life to. This is the person you're going to grow with. Lord willing, and hopefully, a little bit of them is going to rub off on you, and a little bit of you is going to rub off on them. Maybe one of you is way assertive, and one of you is way too passive. And maybe between the two of you working together, you know, as they say, the two become one. Maybe one will be a little more chill, and maybe one will be a little more assertive after it's all said and done. That's how married couples do. Over a while, you start looking like each other. You start talking like each other. It happens. You do it long enough that it happens. It's natural. You operate the same way because you're no longer two separate entities. You're two becoming one. In a lot of ways, a church family can be like that. In a lot of ways, not every way, but in a lot of ways, it can be that way. These are the people with which you're going to grow. Value them. Value the people you're going to grow with inside this church family and this church congregation. Value them. Hear them out. See them as important. Don't see them as an enemy or a hindrance. Don't see them as someone you need to conquer or put in their place, but as someone who you're going to be spending eternity with. You might as well start liking them now. Because according to my watch, eternity is a long time. It's about a couple minutes, at least. We might as well start liking them now. And for the people who come through these doors, and they may be potential people we're going to learn and grow with, value them too. Value them too. Don't look at them as someone I had to get out of the way to see the people I really want to talk to and hang out with. Love them too. Because again, someone took time out of their day to minister to you. There are people in my life who took time out of their day to minister to me. It's about time we start doing the same. Value those people. Verse 4, Philippians 2, verse 4. Do not look out for your personal interests, but also the interests of others. In short, look out for one another, but also listen. Look out for one another, but also listen. Back in the 1980s, there was an electrical engineer. His name was Karl-Heinz Brandenburg. Karl-Heinz, he's from Germany, if you couldn't figure it out. He's an engineer, and he had in the 1980s, had a crazy idea. There was really no way to play music in a digital form, and he wanted to take music and put it in the computer. And he ended up getting with a group called the Motion Picture Entertainment Group in the 1990s, a group of scientists. Motion Picture Entertainment Group, also known as MPEG for short. He joined in with them, and they wanted to create digital versions of audio and video entertainment. And they had to do it in layers, and the first two layers were pretty easy. Layer 1 and layer 2 were pretty easy. For video purposes, they could do that really easy. That third layer, though, man, that third layer was difficult. And they had to test and retest. They had to try over and over and over again. And the test song they used was Suzanne Vega's Tom's Diner. Da, 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 da. Some of the younger ones are like, that's a Fall Out Boy song. No, it's not. It's Suzanne Vega's Tom's Diner. Get educated. So anyway, it's not Fall Out Boy. But yeah, imagine like for almost a decade just hearing da 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 da. Like the fact that this guy can still like say it, make an audible sentence is impressive. So they kept testing with Tom's Diner song over and over and over again because they're trying to compress it down, and they're trying to figure out how far they can compress it without like the sound being distorted on it. And apparently the a cappella versions of the song worked really well for testing. And then in 1997, 1998, they unlocked it. The Motion Picture Entertainment Group Layer 3, also known as the MP3. They made it. They made it. Now, see, they did the encoding. Now, what they decided to do with this, because, man, what happened if something like this ever got out? So what they decided to do is they would only make the decoding available to the general public. The encoding was going to be a top secret scientific thing, because if you got the encoding, you could take any audio file and turn it into a digital format. Oh my gosh, imagine the chaos. Well, there was a guy, according to Karl-Heinz, some guy in Australia figured out the encoding on his own and then put that encoding available on a university PC here in the United States. Just went to a college and just dropped it for free. And the cat got out of the bag. Karl-Heinz was mortified, clearly. Oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. He immediately ran to the Recording Industry Association of America, basically the recording lobby group of the United States, the one who's responsible for all the distribution rights for all of your music, and goes to him and has a conversation with him and tries to warn him, guys, the MP3 is out. This is a thing. They created a monster in a lab, right? And they're trying to warn other people. And they tell the RIAA, guys, the MP3 is out. This is going to change everything. This is going to revolutionize how music is. And the RIAA basically told him this. Well, first of all, we're just the lobbying group, so we have no control over this whatsoever. But even if you're right, let me tell you, first of all, our tech people hate this technology that you created, the MP3. They absolutely hate it. They don't want to mess with it. It's going to cost us way too much money to switch over to this digital format. And besides, we're making money hand over fist with this thing called the compact disc. Perhaps you've heard of it. The CD technology is just so superior to this MP3 thing. It's never going to work. This thing's never going to catch on. People are going to be listening to CDs forever. And we're making lots of money. So clearly we're right. Because seriously, who would ever want to listen to digitized music? Who would ever pay a monthly fee to basically rent your own music? And who doesn't want the whole album? Who wants to buy one song? That's ridiculous. No one would ever want to pay some subscription service just to listen to music. Some people have said, with no sense of hyperbole, The RIA's reaction to Carl Heinz Brandenburg on that day was the ripple effect that damaged the recording industry for decades to come. As from that moment on, they tried to play catch up, trying to figure out how they're going to fix the mess they just now found themselves in. He tried to warn them. He tried to tell them. I made this thing. This happened. It's going to be a mess. We need to fix this. No, we're good. We're good. They didn't listen because they were the RIAA. They have all the money and all the smarts and all the tech. They didn't listen when they had the chance. There are people God has placed in our lives who speak the truth to us, and not just speak the truth, they speak the truth to us in love because they want to see us be successful. They want to see us do well. They want to see us not hurt or damaged. But sometimes with our egos, we think sometimes we may be too high and mighty, and we don't listen to that instruction. We don't listen to that correction. We don't listen to that warning because we lack the humility to listen and acknowledge the people who love and invest in us. Paul's encouraging us to be humble. Why? Because there are people in our lives we need to be listening to. And on the flip side, again, look out for one another as well. God has placed you in the lives of other people in this congregation and in this church. Look out for one another. If someone's driving off the proverbial cliff, we don't sit in our chair and just eat our popcorn and just idly watch it take place, as tempting as sometimes that may be. Tell them. And if they don't listen, then get your popcorn and watch them drive off the proverbial cliff. It's good. This garlic parm. Want some? Yeah, exactly. But you tell them first. Then you get the popcorn. But you look out for one another. And we speak the truth in love, not to ruin their day, not to make their lives miserable, but because they're, as the Bible says, we are their brothers and sisters in Christ, and we should love them accordingly. But also, these brothers and sisters, they're supposed to love you too. They're supposed to love me too. And if they call us out and hold us to account, because again, they don't want to see us damaged and hurt, they want to see us do better in life, have the humility to listen and respond accordingly. Paul tells this church to be humble. Don't end in humility, begin in humility. Don't ignore the people that God has placed in your life. Embrace them and value them. And if Jesus has ever worked any kind of specialness in your life, do the same for someone else. Have the same common purpose, mission, and goal as the church that God has placed you. We need to reach this community. Don't start tomorrow, start today. In just a moment, we're going to have a time of invitation. Beth and worship team, if you guys want to start taking your place. And this is what we call our time of response. Usually it's me and Pastor Albert up front. He's not here today, so I'm going to have John Daly, one of our deacons. He's the one who prayed for us this morning. He'll be over here. I'll be over here. And perhaps you've heard all this, and there's just so much going on in your life, in your mind right now, you can't even focus, and that's okay. Sometimes I can't focus either. And you need someone just to pray for you because there's just so much going on right now. Me and John, we're going to be here. During the music time, you come up, we'll pray for you. Maybe you're hearing me talking about Jesus and following after Jesus and Jesus working in your life, but there's ever been a moment in your life that on your ends, you've acknowledged Jesus Christ as Lord, and you want to follow through in faith in him, and maybe you even want to follow through in what we call believers' baptism because of it. Me and John, we're going to be up here. We love to talk to you about it. Maybe you are following after Jesus, but you're looking for what we say is a church home. Maybe you haven't joined a church home yet and haven't settled in yet. We're Holiday Hill. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you. And maybe you want to learn about the process of what it means to join this church, join this congregation. Again, John and I will be up at the front. This is our time of response. Maybe hearing this, maybe there's some people, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your sibling that you need to get right with. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait until tomorrow. I wasn't here last week because I was at a memorial service for my aunt. She was ready to go home, and what was it was my dad's sister, and one of the crazy things about it is literally in her final day, her last words to my dad were, because he was one of 4, and all the other siblings have since passed. She told my dad, she's like, my only regret is that you're the one that's left behind. I'm leaving you behind. You're all that's left now. My dad's brothers and sisters are all gone now. His mom and dad are gone now. We don't know what tomorrow brings. If you need to get right with someone, swallow that pride, that ego, and have some humility for someone in your life, I highly encourage you to do it before the end of the day. But this is our time of response. So if you're looking for a moment, now's your time.